Imagine being in the SoundPEATS marketing offices and trying to come up with a new name for your earbuds. It must be an absolute nightmare when you're releasing so many new products on such a regular basis. SoundPEATS have taken to dropping the True from some of their older product names, which kind of makes sense because then you can recycle it quite easily without too much effort and people recognize where it's coming from. So we've had the True Air turning into the Air series, we've had the True Capsule turning into the Capsule series, and now we've got the re-rub for 2023 for the TrueEngine 3 SE, which was a really popular model, the Engine 4. Join me and find out why I think this might be SoundPEATS' best release yet in terms of their LDAC 2023 remixes, and carry on watching to see if this product is for you, because there are a few sacrifices that you're going to need to make in order to get, in my opinion, SoundPEATS' best sounding earbud yet. So once again, the UK seems to have got lucky getting a SoundPEATS release early. These are due for global release on the 6th of June. By that time, hopefully there'll be a voucher code in the comments section below so you can get an early bird reduced price. The headline features include mammoth battery life, including 12.5 hours using AAC and up to 9 hours with the high-res wireless codec LDAC, facilitated by the Bluetooth 5.3 ready WUQI chipset. It's another hybrid driver release, although this time there's no balanced armature. It's dual coaxial dynamic drivers, one 10mm woofer and a 6mm tweeter, designed to give you clear highs and rich bass. And this is the first SoundPEATS product to bring you multi-point connectivity, meaning that you can connect to both your laptop and your phone at the same time. The compact design was of particular interest to me as well, as you saw in my Opera 05 review, which was just a little bit too bulky. I'm really looking for a SoundPEATS earbud to fit my ears. Could this be the one? We're going to start with the unboxing experience because SoundPEATS have finally broken away from the norm a little bit, and I think this is their most premium looking and premium feeling unboxing so far. The basic premise is still the same. You've got an artist's impression of the earbuds and the high-res wireless and LDAC logos on the front, the key features and product parameters on the side and the back. But the matte black finish and gold lettering just looks and feels a lot more classy than their usual unboxing. And once inside the box, that impressive experience continues. Rather than having to dig your nails in to try and retrieve the manual, it's now in an envelope with a thumb hole on the side to pull it out a little bit easier. The quick guide, which takes you through the app, and the instruction manual, which is in 7 different languages, are very much the same as previous releases, which is a good thing because they use text and diagrams to pretty good effect, including detailing the product controls. And because this model doesn't have ANC, that holding down the left button for 1.5 seconds means that you can cycle tracks backwards, unlike some of their other releases where that would trigger your ANC mode. So well done SoundPEATS for implementing that. The cable is your standard A to C charge cable, nothing fancy here. The tips are worth a mention though. They're slightly different to the usual SoundPEATS tips in that they're not quite as flat. They're still soft and they work well with this particular earbud. Now onto the design. We'll start with the charge case. Whilst it is unquestionably SoundPEATS with that very familiar looking pill shape, I can't help but feel that this one has more of a wow factor. Like the S3 Deluxe HS case, they've gone for a glossy finish, although it definitely has a little bit more durability about it. And the metallic coffee brown colour is certainly very eye-catching. It's similarly sized to the Mini Pro HS case, albeit slightly larger at 6.1 by 4.5 by 2.8 centimeters. It's a compact-ish case that wears well inside a jacket pocket when you're on the move. You could probably even carry it in your trouser pocket, and considering it weighs only 43 grams fully loaded, it's not going to give you a bruised thigh if you have to run for the train. There's a USB socket and a reset and pairing button on the bottom. The case doesn't have wireless charging, and there's no quick charge feature either, which is a shame. However, with a long single-use battery life, that shouldn't quite be such an ordeal. The case is 350 mAh, which gives you just under 3 additional charges, taking the total battery life to a reported up to 43 hours. In keeping with the minimalist design, there's no case LED on the front. Instead, you have to flip the case open, and you're greeted with the LED in the center in between the two earbuds. Green is above 50%, amber is 10 to 49, and red is below 10%. It will flash white when the buds are pairing. And in terms of usability, there's some other nice features here, including that friction hinge lid, which I think is probably the most impressive so far. It reaffirms the durability. That hinge isn't going to fly open and shut when you've got a gust of wind when you open it outdoors. But it also adds to the user experience too. This is SoundPEATS' first set of earbuds which features multi-point connectivity. So Hall switch mode, where you can pop open the case and pop it on the desk and then do all your pairing with your devices without taking the earbuds out, is particularly really important in this instance. Multipoint isn't configured by default. You have to go into the app and toggle it on in that main customization page. You'll get a message telling you that LDAC will be switched off because you can't use LDAC and multipoint at the same time. The earbuds will then reboot and you'll be ready to initiate pairing with your second device. Locate the reset and pairing button on the bottom of the case, hold it down for a couple of seconds, and very quickly you'll see both the LED turn white and pulse periodically to tell you that it's gone into pairing mode, and then pick up your second device and you'll see it appear in your available Bluetooth devices. Press connect and Bob's your uncle, you're now using multipoint on two separate devices. Sadly, there's no device list in the app like you get with something like the Oppo Enco X2, and you can see which devices you're connected to. And there's some limitations in how multipoint could be used. I could only really get it working when phone calls came through on my secondary device. I couldn't easily switch from listening to a YouTube video on one device to then listening to Tidal on the other, for example. You've got some nice strong magnets holding the buds in, but you've also got plenty of surface area to grab the buds, so it isn't fiddly when you're removing them and putting them back in the case. And every time you do so, that LED is giving you a reminder of how much battery you've got remaining in the case, which is another really useful feature. The design of the Engine 4 goes back to SoundPEATS' roots a little bit, combining the shape of something like the Sonic or the Mini and the open heart design which we've seen on the TrueEngine 3 SE and the H1. You've got a nice big finger touch control area with the SoundPEATS logo that is quite discreet and isn't too flashy. And on the inside you've got a softer grey matte area that gives the earbuds a little bit more resistance and it helps them stay in your ears a little bit better. Rather than using shallow but oversized nozzles, which we've seen on some releases in the earbud market recently, instead they've gone back to a sort of deeper insertion with a smaller diameter rounded nozzle, and as a result they look initially like there's quite a bit of depth there, and they do measure 27mm, but once they're in your ears they certainly don't protrude anything like as much as the Opera or the Mini Pro HS. From both the front and the side profile, I don't think they look any worse than something like the Jabra Elite series, which wear in a similar way. If, like me, you found that the Opera 03 and Opera 05 were just simply too bulky, you're not going to have the same problem with the Engine 4. SoundPEATS have definitely remedied that here. And whilst the earbuds are pretty heavy at just over 6 grams, you've got to house that battery somehow. I still think they're okay for exercise, certainly for wearing at the gym, they'd probably be fine. I believe they're only IPX4 rated though, so don't get tempted to go swimming with them. And now we move on to the sound. As we mentioned in the intro, it's a dual coaxial dynamic driver arrangement. You've got a 10mm titanium plated composite membrane woofer and a 6mm tweeter, along with that LDAC support giving you up to 960k audio. And this allows SoundPEATS to deliver their most immersive audio experience since their H1 and H2. You've got a deep lower frequency response giving you rich and full bass lines. The bass heads will almost certainly find far more satisfying than their recent releases like the Mini Pro HS and the Capsule 3 Pro. And an open and airy soundstage that will have H1 and H2 owners salivating. The Engine 4 has a boosted sub bass that isn't overpowering, but it has a growl and a rumble that you'll feel as well as hear. This is accentuated when you switch the tips out from the medium size to the large. I highly recommend doing this because you'll have a completely different experience. As soon as you do, you'll notice that there's far more fullness to your kicks and your toms. If you're a house music fan or into techno in particular, these music styles will be night and day when you switch those tips out. Kick drums have a clean and punchy edge, and compared with something like the Earfun Air Pro 3, which I reviewed not that long ago and really wasn't a fan of, bass has a much greater texture and a more natural tone. On the Earfun it felt very overpowering and overwhelming. On the Engine 4 it isn't quite as exaggerated. Instead you've got a better balance against the mid bass that prevents tracks from sounding muddy or boxy, but it still retains energy and drive. On Into You by Ariana Grande, for example, the bass line and the synth sound much more natural and contrast against the higher frequencies to give the vocal range plenty of presence, separating effortlessly from cowbells and percussion. On Gecko by Oliver Heldens, the kick is chunky and fast with plenty of rumble to the bass line. There's a better balance that results in improved and more authentic harmonics without compromising energy or flavour. Lower mids are clean and lean, and this prevents the mix from sounding bloated or muddy in any way. The balanced mid-range gives a natural tone and body to both instruments and vocals. The gradual climb and peak from 1 to 4K brings good attack to the kick drums and ensures the vocals have good clarity. Female vocals can sound a little bit back from the arrangement at times, but male vocals typically sound front and center without feeling too prominent. On If You Don't Know Me by Simply Red, for example, Mick Hucknall's silky vocals pan around with good presence. Switch it up to something more raw, a rap track like Jimmy Cooks by Drake and 21 Savage, and it's similarly impressive. Despite the wobble of the sub bass, 21 Savage's tone, even when whispering, is transmitted faithfully. The dip from 3K and the gradual rise and peak to 7K gives sufficient impression of detail without sounding etched or sibilant. On Come On Done by Duran Duran, shakers and other percussive elements have texture that isn't too sharp or edgy, whilst the open soundstage gives tracks a live feel. The dip around 5K can leave backing vocals and some instruments sounding a little distant, but otherwise instruments are straightforward to place. On Crucify by Tori Amos, the mix of acoustic piano, mandolin, ukulele and percussion shows off the Engine 4's breadth. For both complex and simplistic arrangements, for me the Engine 4 are an incredibly enjoyable set of TWS. There's a bit more depth and texture to the bass than something like the Capsule 3 Pro, and whilst it's not perhaps as overemphasized as the H1, there's more presence and more body to the mid-range that overall makes it more suitable for a variety of different music styles. There's also less coarseness to the trebles, and this makes them less fatiguing. You can listen to them for long periods of time without ever getting bored or at the same time ever getting fatigued. For me, the tuning is once again spot on for the driver arrangement. Just as on their single driver releases like the Capsule 3 Pro, they got it right as well. They aren't as pushy sounding as the Opera series and they're not as raw as the H1, but give them a few hours of listening with them, I'm pretty sure these will be everything that you could possibly want from a budget TWS. Now we'll take a look at how they perform on calls with 3 different scenarios, starting with silence indoors.
Okay, this is the first call quality test for the SoundPEATS Engine 4. This is in an indoor environment with absolute silence in the scene. What we're trying to replicate here is what you could expect when you're at home, working from home perhaps, and you've got to take or make an important call, or you're doing a presentation or interview over Teams or Zoom. So we're testing to hear how the weight and the tone and the clarity of your voice fares, and there's not too much excess compression or digitization being applied. Okay, this time we're in a busy coffee shop and testing the SoundPEATS Engine 4 once again to see how they perform on your calls in a busy environment where you've got a lot of indistinct chatter going on around you. So it could be the busy coffee shop, which we're in. It could be a busy office, something like that. What we're looking for here is how well the buds perform at distinguishing your voice from that indistinct chatter which is going on around you. Next up is a 2023 release, again from SoundPEATS. Their in-ear LDAC supporting Engine 4. I don't really know too much about this because it's only just about to my lettable. Haven't put it through any mic tests yet, so I'm really interested to hear how it's performing compared to some of the competitors in this space.
So as you heard there, call quality probably not the unique selling point of the Engine 4, whilst the noise reduction algorithm did pretty well outdoors in terms of nullifying those engine noises and those low rumbling sounds. Indoors, where you've got a very busy scene, it really struggled to differentiate your voice from the voices around you, and in the end it didn't reduce the noise particularly well, and it reduced your own voice a little bit. So when it comes to calls, unfortunately, if you're looking at making a lot of calls in busy environments with your earbud, the Engine 4 probably isn't going to cut the mustard. The Engine 4 do have app support, but I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this because we've done that to death in previous SoundPEATS reviews. The features and functions are pretty much identical regardless of which earbud that you're selecting. You've got the battery levels of each bud on the main page. You've got 3 EQ options: adaptive EQ, where it runs some simulation and then gives you a custom built EQ. You've got the custom equalizer, where you've got 10 bands that you can alter in various different ways depending on your preferred sound signature, and then you've got 8 different presets which I've talked about in other reviews such as the Capsule 3 Pro. You can also turn multi-point and touch controls off here. You can toggle gaming mode as well. That reduces latency, particularly on games. I found that I'd have to switch this on if I was playing any mobile games because otherwise the lag was just too much. The app experience with SoundPEATS is very basic and it falls some way short of the likes of Realme and Soundcore with their apps. So finally, battery life. This is one of the big headlines with the Engine 4 in terms of what SoundPEATS claim it can deliver. Up to 12.5 hours single use playtime with AAC, and on LDAC up to 9 hours. This wasn't too far away from my own personal experiences. I got around 10.5 hours using AAC, and on LDAC it was 7 hours and 50 minutes, so just under 8 hours. Certainly not far away from SoundPEATS estimates. Because you don't have active noise cancellation, obviously that's going to have a positive impact in terms of battery, but at the same time I had to turn the volume up a little bit higher when I was outdoors. Even though passive isolation is very good, still had to turn it up a little bit compared with buds with ANC. As a result, I was operating at between 70 and 80%, so that explains the kind of discrepancy compared with what SoundPEATS were advertising. But even so, I think it's a really impressive return. You can work out what that's going to be sort of pro rata with the 43 hours advertised with the case, but you're getting around 2.5 additional charges, and it takes around 2 hours to charge the case fully. So to summarize, as you can tell, I'm a big fan of the Engine 4, and in terms of what they bring to SoundPEATS' product portfolio, where I think there was a little bit of a gap, they're the 2023 version of the TrueEngine 3 SE or H1, and they're delivering fantastic sound and a big open soundstage that deviates away from the more conservative single driver approach which we've seen with the Mini Pro HS and the Capsule 3 Pro. As long as you can do without some of those features like active noise cancellation, in-ear detection and quick charge, the Engine 4 are a really compelling option. They're going to be retailing around the $70 mark, but hopefully, as I said, we'll have some discount codes for you in the comments section below that will allow you to get an early bird price and hopefully a big discount off the MSRP. What did you think of the review? Please do put your comments in the comments section below. Give the video a like if you found it useful, and feel free to subscribe and you'll get more updates of more reviews, other tests and call quality tests, of which we've got a few more coming in these next couple of weeks. For now, it's ReganCipher signing off.